All right. Thank you, everyone. Someone just told me that I'm much smaller in person, which is exactly what you want to hear before you do a big talk. So thank you for that. So this is a brand new talk I've never given before. This is the first time, and the inspiration for it came actually at the previous Remedy event in Toronto. I was there. I dragged along my 63-year-old dad, who came in as an omnivore, who was just kind of curious about this. And he listened to 3 days of talks about why this is such a great diet, lifestyle, and cooking demos, and left 100% plant-based. And here we are 5 months later. He's still there. His energy's way up. His health has been transformed. So big thanks to this event and to Benji and the crew. And I hope also that can be an example for some people who are here who might be at the beginning, because it's just a very, very powerful thing. And it can be hard. There's a lot, there's a lot of new stuff. It's overwhelming. So when I was sitting there in that audience, I kept listening to these talks, hearing the inspiration and the evidence that this works for my dad's sake, and kept kind of waiting, because he did cooking demos or saw that stuff too. I kept waiting for okay, so where's going to be the talk where they say, when you get home from this thing and you wake up the next morning and it's breakfast time, what do you eat for breakfast? And what's on the table for lunch? So that's what I tried to make with this talk. I tried to add that to this event. So hopefully it goes as planned. So a little bit of my story, just also so that you get the sense that this isn't just for people who are brand new at this. This is also about really leveling up a plant-based, or even a whole foods plant-based diet, to a diet that is really, really rich in micronutrients, about the best possible diet you can possibly eat for energy in the short term, protection against disease in the long term. Because that's where I am right now. I've been vegetarian for 8 years, vegan for 6, whole foods vegan, 3, 4. And it all started for me as I was a marathon runner. Got into marathon running in college. I wasn't a very good runner at first, but I ran a marathon time that was 100 minutes too slow to qualify for the Boston Marathon, and that was my goal. So I kind of, put my head to the ground and set to work and started looking at my diet. And I looked at protein, carbohydrate, and fat. Kind of learned how to eat in that way, not even close to vegetarian or vegan, not even thinking about that. So that was the very first phase of my healthy eating journey. And I made progress for 5-6 years towards that marathon goal. And finally, when I was really close, I was 10 minutes away from qualifying for Boston, I decided to go vegetarian. Not thinking that it was going to improve my performance, but kind of as a just throwing my hands up and saying, I don't know if I'm going to get there anymore. I started my website, nomeatathlete.com, as an experiment just to journal what I was doing as a marathon runner trying to go vegetarian. And it turned out that in 6 months, I took those final 10 minutes off of my marathon time. Things just went amazingly well. And from then, I didn't look back. This diet worked for that, and that was not even vegan or whole foods or anything like that. So pretty soon after that, got into ultra running, went vegan, did a few 50-mile races, and I did a 100-mile race. And in the process of training for the 100-miler, I found myself really gravitating towards whole foods, just not the store, but yes, the store, but the beans, nuts, the bulk section of the store, fruits, vegetables, just really whole stuff, nothing processed. And I even ran out of protein powder one day, just out of laziness, didn't buy any more. I just kind of ran out, meant to get to the store to get more, but never did. And I had kind of relied on that maybe as a crutch. And within 3-4 weeks, I started to remember that I still hadn't gotten the protein powder, and that I felt totally fine. So then 2-3 more months went by. I did the 100-miler. Everything went totally fine. I was putting in more miles than I ever had before, and never went back on protein powder. So that was the beginning of me, embracing that you could be not just a healthy person, but an athlete on a completely whole foods, plant-based diet. So I think a lot of people were there. I think a lot of people get that now, that we can just eat whole foods, and even when you're there, you don't really need to think much about protein, carbohydrate, fat. Some would say not at all. You can just eat whole foods and be very healthy. But what I think, this is what I really only the past few years have I started to realize, is that there's this another level of not just writing it off and saying, well, I eat whole foods so I don't have to think about what I'm eating, but actually saying which whole foods can I choose to really, really maximize, like I said, my energy and health in the short term, but also my resistance to disease in the long term. So what I want to talk about today is based around this idea of what are the 7 foods we should eat every day. We'll spend a little bit of time there. I don't want to keep us too late because I know Gregor went a little bit late, and we want to get to dinner. And I'm going to be showing you food pictures, so we'll all want to get to dinner. So I'll go pretty quickly through like the why you want them. I don't intend to get into chemistry and biology discussions and all that because that's for the doctor guys. What I can contribute though is the things to know, some practical tips about these foods and ways to get them that make them, make it very convenient and even more than that, make it automatic so that you don't need to think about checking off your list of several servings a day of 7 or 12 or 18 foods or whatever it is, but choosing some meals, and I'll give you 3 specific ones, the ones that I build every single day's diet around, 3 types of meals that make it more or less automatic to get these foods that you should be eating every single day. And then at the end, I'll show you what a perfect day looks like. Perfect, of course, being a relative term, and they're not really being a perfect day, but what a typical day looks like with 3 of these meals providing tons of these great foods for you. And the last thing I want to say about it is that all this, for me, is kind of done from the perspective of how can we make this as effortless as possible. So I have 2 kids, they're 6 and 3. They keep me busy. This work, coming, speaking at things, exercising, all that stuff, and regular life keeps me busy. So I am not someone who spends hours and hours in the kitchen. I can't possibly do that. So I like to systematize things and automate things, and that's where I'm coming from with this. So the first book that got me going with this way of thinking was Dr. Joel Fuhrman's Super Immunity. It's a really, really good book. I would highly recommend that you read it if you're new to this way of thinking about eating for micronutrition more than the macronutrients of protein, carbohydrates, and fat. And in Super Immunity, he puts forth this acronym, which actually in the book is GOMS, which is sort of an unfortunate one. It has 2 B's in a row. So thankfully somebody changed it to GBOMS, which is, I guess, a little more violent sounding, but is at least easier to remember. And that is greens, beans, onions, mushrooms, berries, and seeds. Greens, beans, onions, mushrooms, berries, seeds. It sounds like a lot, but if you say it 50 times in your head, you will not be able to forget it. I promise you that. We can look at what he meant. That's the way to remember it. But greens, of course, means leafy greens. Beans includes all the other legumes too, which is chickpeas and lentils. Not just beans, but legumes. Onions also includes garlic, which is the allium family. Then there's mushrooms. Then there's berries and pomegranate he adds in there. And then there's seeds, which of course also includes nuts. So this is a really nice framework. And for me, this was kind of a change. Now I had like a target each day. It wasn't just eat whole foods and know that I'll be fine. It was eat whole foods and know that I'll be fine, but make sure that I get these certain things every day. So I like that about that. I like it for its simplicity. But I think it's not quite comprehensive enough for someone who is new to this way of eating. It doesn't really tell you what to eat because you can't get 100% of your calories or really anything close to it from that. It would be difficult to eat just those foods. And in fairness to Joel Fuhrman, he has a whole program outlined in Eat to Live that does give you much more and exactly what you should be eating. So this is just a little part of it. But that whole program, that's a whole program, and that's not what the goal is to give that here. This is about really quick, simple, take-home stuff that we can put to use. So then there's someone named Michael Greger. A few people may have heard of him. If dinner's late, he's the reason. He wrote a wonderful book called How Not to Die. And he's still signing books, I imagine, right now? Okay, then I can say this. So he says that he scours every English language nutrition journal article every year. So you don't have to, right. Well, what I did was I read his 600-page book. Right. He better still be signing books. No, that's a joke. I love this book. And in fact, what you should do if you didn't already go get a book signed by him is you should go buy his book because it's a really long book. It's great, chock full of just amazing information. But the 150 pages near the end that's about his daily dozen, there's 12 foods he wants you to eat every day, that to me is as good a practical nutrition guide for someone getting started as there is. It's just so much, the perfect amount of depth, and you really do understand these foods without being a really, really hard thing to follow. So I like it a lot. Let's see, so he's got something more extensive than Fuhrman here. He's got beans, berries, other fruits, cruciferous vegetables, greens, other vegetables, flax seeds, nuts and seeds, herbs and spices, whole grains, beverages, and exercise. So this, to me, is a little bit, it's kind of a lot, right? So he's got this Daily Dozen app where you can get check boxes about the number of servings of each of these things. And I think that's a really, really great app. I think it's a wonderful tool for someone to use. Where I have fallen short in trying to check those boxes off, and I have gone through several weeks of trying to do every day of checking off those boxes, is I often get to the end of a day, and because I didn't really have any plan for the day, it was just, well, it's breakfast time, I'm going to get some berries and get some other stuff, and I would kind of check things off throughout the day, but I'd get to the end of the day, finish dinner, maybe have one more small dessert possibly that I could do, and I got to get berries, flax seeds, onions, and go for a run as part of that. So what I said I need to do is have some sort of framework that gets me this stuff automatically. So that's what I set out to do with this talk. You'll see that I present 7 foods, mainly just because in a short talk, like we don't have a lot of time, it's somewhat easier to go through 7 things than it is to go through 12 things. But you'll see that I've really just kind of looked at the 2 lists, Gregor's and Furman's, combined them, looked at the places where they overlap, and then sort of condensed them into somewhat larger groups.